What if everything you've been taught about why God destroyed the Nephilim is incomplete? What if the real reason is hidden in a single paradoxical verse that scholars have struggled to explain for centuries? By the end of this investigation, you will discover a shocking truth from the original Hebrew text and the Book of Enoch that reveals a spiritual corruption so severe it demanded the great flood. And it all starts with Genesis 6-4, a verse that says the Nephilim were on the earth both before and after the flood, a contradiction that challenges everything. For generations, the story of the Nephilim has been simplified into a tale of giant warriors, the offspring of fallen angels and human women, wiped out by God's judgment in the great flood. But if that's the full story, why does Genesis 6-4 explicitly state the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward? That word afterward, in Hebrew, acharey-ken, is a temporal marker pointing to a time after the events of the pre-flood world. If the flood universally destroyed all flesh, as Genesis 7:21-23 declares, how could these beings exist afterward? This is the central silence in the biblical narrative that traditional interpretations cannot answer. They either ignore it or explain it away as a later editorial insertion, but I propose we take the text at its word. The presence of Nephilim after the flood isn't a mistake. It's a clue to a deeper, more terrifying reality. The early church father Origen, in his work Contra Celsum, noted this anomaly and suggested that the spiritual implications of the Nephilim extended beyond their physical forms. But modern scholarship often dismisses such insights as allegory. Yet when we cross-reference with Numbers 13:33, where the Israelite spies report seeing Nephilim in Canaan, descendants of Enoch, from the Hebrew root anek, meaning to neck or to strangle, implying giants, the puzzle deepens. How can beings from before the flood reappear centuries later? The silence of the text on this point is not an oversight. It's evidence that something survived the flood, something that wasn't merely physical. This contradiction forces us to re-examine the very reason for the flood's judgment. Was it just about violence and corruption, as Genesis 6:11-12 says? Or was there a spiritual contamination so profound that water alone couldn't cleanse it entirely? The Book of Enoch, referenced in Jude 1:14-15, provides a missing piece, but we'll get to that. First, we must confront the popular interpretation and why it fails to address this paradox. The standard Sunday school lesson says the Nephilim were giants, their size and wickedness provoked God, and the flood reset humanity. But if that's true, why does the biblical text allow for their post-flood existence? Either the text is contradictory, or we're missing a layer of meaning. And that layer points to a reason for destruction that goes far beyond physical stature. It points to a hybridization of spirit and flesh that threatened the ontological boundary between heaven and earth. So pause and consider, what if the flood was not just a punishment, but a surgical strike against a spiritual infection? What if the Nephilim represented something that could not be drowned? That question will revolutionize your understanding of Genesis, and it leads us directly into the heart of the debate. Now, let's engage both sides of the debate. On one hand, the traditional view, upheld by scholars like Dr. Michael Heiser in his work The Unseen Realm, argues that the Nephilim after the flood are simply a different group of giants, using the term generically. He points to the Rephaim, Anakim, and other giant clans in Deuteronomy and Joshua as evidence that the word Nephilim became a catch-all for giants. This seems plausible until we examine the Hebrew. The word Nephilim comes from the root naphel, meaning to fall. It's not merely a descriptor of size, it denotes a state of being, those who have fallen, or perhaps those who cause others to fall. In Genesis 6-4, the text calls them Jibram, mighty men, but the emphasis is on their origin as offspring of the B'nai Elohim, the sons of God. This phrase, B'nai Elohim, appears in Job 1-6 and 2-1, referring to angelic beings, and in Psalm 82-1, where God judges divine beings. The ancient Jewish tradition, recorded in the Targum Anxilos, an Aramaic translation of the Torah, interprets these sons of God as angels. So if the Nephilim are the hybrid progeny of angels and humans, their existence poses a theological problem. They blur the line between created kinds. Now the objection arises, if all flesh was destroyed in the flood, how could any Nephilim survive? This is where we preempt the first natural skepticism. Not the same beings, but look at Numbers 13:33. The spies say, "We saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim." The Hebrew here is we ha-Nephilim, with the definite article suggesting a specific group tied to the pre-flood Nephilim. The Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible from the 3rd century BCE, translates Nephilim in both Genesis and Numbers as Gignatus, but adds notes implying these are the same entities. More critically, the text never says the Nephilim were wiped out in the flood. It says all flesh died, but if the Nephilim are partially angelic, does flesh fully apply? The silence is telling. The flood account in Genesis 7 focuses on all in whose nostrils was the breath of life. But angelic beings don't have breath in the same way. This opens a door. To build our case, we turn to an active investigation of sources. We have the biblical text, but we also have extra-biblical manuscripts like the Dead Sea Scrolls, which include fragments of the Book of Enoch. In the Qumran community, Enoch was treated as authoritative, the scholar-doctor. John Collins, in his book The Apocalyptic Imagination, notes that Enochic literature was central to Second Temple Judaism, the very context of Jesus and the Apostles. So, dismissing Enoch outright is historically negligent, but we're not relying on Enoch alone. We're using it to illuminate the biblical silence. For instance, Genesis 6:1-4 is brief, almost cryptic, because the original audience likely knew the Fula story from traditions like Enoch. This is where we find our first micro-twist. But before we get there, we must refute the popular theory that the Nephilim were merely giants. Their size is almost incidental. The real issue is their nature. And the Hebrew, the phrase they were on the earth, uses the verb haya, which implies a state of existence, not just physical presence. And the conjunction, and also afterward, links two epochs, pre-flood and post-flood. This isn't a generic reference. It's a specific continuity. So if the traditional view fails to explain this continuity, what does? The answer lies in a dimension of the Nephilim that most people never notice, their spiritual legacy. And that discovery changes everything. Here is the overlooked evidence that dismantles the popular interpretation. While the physical bodies of the Nephilim may have perished in the flood, their spirits did not. This idea comes from the Book of Enoch, specifically 1 Enoch 15:8-12, which describes the fate of the Watcher's offspring. It says, "But now the giants who are born from the spirits and flesh will be called evil spirits on the earth, and their dwelling places will be upon the earth. The spirits that have gone forth from the body of their flesh are evil spirits, for from humans they came into being, and from the holy watchers is the beginning of their creation. Evil spirits they will be on the earth, and evil spirits they will become." This is a staggering revelation. According to this text, when the Nephilim died, their spirits hybrid, disembodied entities, became the evil spirits, or demons, that plague humanity. This isn't just an apocryphal fantasy. It's rooted in Jewish intertestamental thought. The historian Dr. Annette Yoshiko Reed, in her work Fallen Angels and the History of Judaism and Christianity, traces how early Jewish exegetes grappled with the origin of demons, and many pointed to the Nephilim. Now let's anchor this in the biblical text. Where does the Bible hint at this? In the New Testament, Jesus encounters demonic forces, and in Luke 10:18 he says, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven." This echoes the fall of the Watchers. But more directly in Revelation 12:9, Satan is called the Great Dragon, that ancient serpent who is called the Devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. This throwing down is parallel to the fall of the B'nai Elohim in Genesis 6. The typology is clear. Rebellion in the spiritual realm has earthly consequences. But here's the crucial link. The spirits of the Nephilim, as evil spirits, continue to influence humanity after the flood. This explains why God's judgment didn't end with the flood. The spiritual corruption persisted. Now, pause and consider the weight of this. If the Nephilim became evil spirits, then the flood was not just about wiping out giant bodies. It was about containing a spiritual outbreak. The water purified the earth physically, but the spiritual realm required a different solution. This reframes the entire narrative. The real reason God destroyed the Nephilim wasn't their size. It was their hybrid nature that produced immortal spirits capable of endless corruption. This is why the text mentions them after the flood, because their influence survived. And this leads to a profound theological consequence. Sin isn't just human wrongdoing. It's intertwined with spiritual entities that seek to distort creation. Before we go further, if this investigation is already shifting how you see Scripture, take a second to like this video and subscribe. What comes next is where this gets truly staggering. Now we escalate the revelations with an unexpected connection that ties everything together. The second twist comes from a New Testament passage most people never link to the Nephilim, 1 Peter 3:19-20. It says, "In which also he went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison who formerly did not obey, when God's patience waited in the days of Noah." While the ark was being prepared, who are these spirits in prison? Traditional Christianity often says they are fallen angels, and that fits. But look at the context. Peter is talking about the time of Noah in 2 Peter 2:4-5. It says, "For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness to be kept until the judgment, if he did not spare the ancient world, but preserved Noah, a herald of righteousness, with 7 others, when he brought a flood upon the world of the ungodly." The angels who sinned are the watchers, and the spirits in prison could include both the watchers and their offspring, the spirits of the Nephilim. This is supported by the early Christian text, the Apocalypse of Peter, which describes the punishment of the souls of the Nephilim. But we don't need Apocrypha alone. The Greek word for spirits in 1 Peter is pneumason, which can refer to disembodied beings. And the prison is phylake, a place of custody. Now let's preempt the second objection. Why should we trust the Book of Enoch if it's not in the Bible? The answer is that the New Testament authors did. Jude 1:14-15 quotes directly from 1 Enoch 1-9, saying, "Enoch, the 7th from Adam, prophesied, saying, Behold, the Lord comes with 10,000s of his holy ones, to execute judgment on all... Jude treats Enoch as a prophetic source. The early church fathers like Tertullian and Irenaeus referenced Enochic traditions, so while Enoch isn't canonical for all traditions, its historical value as a witness to Jewish belief during the Second Temple period is undeniable, and it solves the biblical silence. But here's the surprising cross-reference. In Matthew 12:43-45, Jesus speaks of an unclean spirit that wanders through waterless places seeking rest, which in Jewish demonology was associated with the desert, where spirits of the dead or fallen entities roamed. This imagery echoes the desolation after the flood, where the spirits of the Nephilim, as evil spirits, seek to inhabit new hosts. This isn't speculation. It's typology that the early Christians would have recognized. The flood was a baptism of judgment, as 1 Peter 3:21 implies, but it didn't eradicate the spiritual forces. They remained, requiring Christ's ultimate victory. So, the real reason God destroyed the Nephilim was to initiate a process of spiritual warfare that culminates in the cross. Their hybrid existence breached the boundary between divine and human, introducing a corruption that only the God-man Jesus could heal. Pause and consider, what if every instance of demonic oppression in the Bible traces back to the rebellion of the Watchers and the spirits of the Nephilim? This reframes the urgency of the gospel. It's not just about saving souls, it's about reclaiming creation from a spiritual invasion that began before the flood. And this leads us to the final resolution. So what is the definitive resolution? The real reason God destroyed the Nephilim was not their physical might, but their spiritual threat. They represented a corruption of the created order, a mingling of angelic and human realms that produced immortal evil spirits. The flood was a necessary purge of the physical manifestation, but the spiritual remnants persisted, explaining their post-flood presence in biblical narrative and human experience. This revelation has a practical application for your life today. If the spirits of the Nephilim are active as demons, then spiritual warfare isn't a metaphor. It's a historical reality rooted in Genesis. Your faith isn't just about personal salvation. It's about engaging in a cosmic conflict that began with the Watchers. Understanding this deepens your appreciation for Christ's authority over all powers. as Colossians 2:15 declares. Now, the virile question you carry into your life, what if the battle against evil spirits today is directly connected to the rebellion of the Watchers and the hybrid legacy of the Nephilim? This changes how you pray, how you read scripture, and how you view the world's darkness. If this changed how you read the Book of Enoch, drop the word Nephilim in the comments below. I read every single one. Share this with someone who needs to see it. And subscribe, because what we uncover next will go even deeper. And if what we uncovered today is true, then there is something even more hidden about what happened after the flood, something the Book of Enoch only hints at. That is where we go next.